So welcome everybody to our final webinar in our series. And the series has been focusing on our Teaching Innovation Award that we do annually. And Dr. Claire Donald and Dr. Laura McCaughey is here today to present our final presentation. But I'm really excited about this presentation because it's on a subject. It covers two areas that I think is really important. So it covers a subject area that many academics are now having to start to teach, so programming for analysis. But this is really interesting because for us as a company, this project was really important for us because it actually pushed our boundaries of our technology somewhat in the way that we have thought about and also created some of our smart worksheets from this particular project. So it's been a fascinating journey for us to witness the start of this creation of this smart worksheet like I said, from a technical perspective, but also in the application of that and how it's been really beneficial in helping students and academics to teach programming, which is obviously, something which is becoming much more common. And I certainly something that I am really anxious about if I have to teach this, or if I have to cover this, I would certainly be very anxious about that. And I'm certain that students also feel the same when they're having to cover this particular subject. But I know that having something which is scaffolded like this to help students work through that, and maybe staff and other people who are supporting this, which haven't done this before, could utilize this technology in this particular smart worksheet that you've been really intrinsic in developing. So just a reminder about the Teaching Innovation Awards. So we are lucky to be in a position to run Teaching Innovation Awards that showcase the innovation by academics across the globe. A very, very high caliber of innovations that we are subject to when we're looking at these awards, and they're not necessarily awards that are or projects that are utilizing our own resources. So whilst we love to support our partners in the use of our products, and we're also really keen to showcase and celebrate the innovation of academics who are very often working in highly stressful situations and don't necessarily get as much recognition as they probably should. But we're really happy to be able to support and showcase our colleagues who are not using LearnSci digital resources, but just looking at and embracing digital science and digital technology in their teaching and learning strategies. Some of these projects have been published. They have been of such high caliber and such high impact, they've actually been published. And so if you're interested in either the Teaching Innovation Awards, please go join our website and have a look, and you can find out more information on the website. Similarly, if you're interested in educational research, whether that's using a project that you've already done and looking to see how that could be converted into a project or a publication with our support, please do so. Or even if you're thinking about starting something, you've been inspired perhaps through the projects that you might have seen through this webinar series, and if you're inspired by that, please do get in touch and we will guide you in that process. So my name is Leanne Williams. I'm a professor of bioscience education at the University of Warwick. I'm also academic lead for LearnSci, and I'm really excited to be hosting this very last webinar. It'll be very relaxed. It has been recorded, and so if you do not wish your face to be recorded, so you don't want your camera on, please feel free to turn it off. I ask you to be muted though with your mic for the whole of the webinar until the end, where we will have time for questions and answers from the audience. To be very relaxed, we've got a whole hour set up for this, and so we will hope to have 10 to 15 minutes of question time at the end, depending on how we get on. And so without any further ado, I will love to hand over to Claire, who's going to start us off, and then we'll pass over to Laura halfway through. So Claire, please do go ahead.
Amazing. Thank you so much. What a nice introduction. Laura and I are absolutely delighted to be able to be here today to present this work that we've been doing alongside LearnSci, and we were delighted to be awarded the Teaching Innovation Award. So we're very excited to be able to share what we have done so far with everybody, and we're delighted that there's so many people here. We were talking earlier about what a difficult time of year it is with the wrapping up reset diets for last academic year. and then of course prepping for this academic year. So appreciate everybody's time. So what we are going to talk about is our use of Smart Worksheets to help support our students learning R. So doing a little bit of statistics and coding and data handling. And as Leanne said, thinking about this from both the student side, so the benefits to the students, as well as the benefits to the staff that we've had. So hopefully we can get these slides to move. There we go. So both Laura and I are based within the School of Infection and Immunity within the College of Medical, Veterinary and Life Sciences at the University of Glasgow. And both of us are quite heavily focused on working with second-year undergraduate life sciences students. So in Scotland, we have 4-year degrees. So our students, when they come into Glasgow, they pick a degree specialty that they're planning on doing, but they don't actually lock this in until the end of second year. So we're working with students that are across all different degree disciplines, and we're trying to give them the very basic, fundamental, essential skills that they need to know for moving into third and fourth year, so doing their pre-honours and their honours years, but then of course giving them that excellent foundation to build upon those skills that we're teaching them to go on and use them in their careers. So one of the essential skills that we know is really, really important, regardless of what degree specialism our students go on to do, is working with data. So by this, I mean data handling, interpretation, visualization. We know that this is a highly sought after skill that all employers in a variety of different sectors have. So it's really important that our students become confident with working with data, being able to handle large data sets and being able to use statistics appropriately. Because they will likely have to do this regardless of what degree they go on to do or kind of jobs they go on to do. So at the University of Glasgow, we teach them to handle large data sets using R and working in something called RStudio. So if you're not familiar with R, it's essentially a programming language. So it's designed for working with data, performing statistics, and generating plots and graphs and things. So our students are taught how to use this using R, and you can see the interface here. So this is a kind of desktop app. It's a bit like Excel, but on steroids. It's a big upgrade. Students will work, they will write code, they will use that to generate their plots, and it's great for generating really, or handling lots of data and being able to produce really good and intricate data sets and plot outcomes for that. So just as Leanne said in her introduction, we know that our students have a lot of anxiety around working with data, working with statistics, and being able to accurately do statistical analysis. And many of them will never have had any experience of working with codes or generating any kind of data in this kind of way. They have a very limited background of working with this. The other major issue that we have working with our second year students is that we are working with very large cohorts. And as I will present in a minute when I talk about our study specifically, you know, some of our courses can be up to 600, 700 students. So they're incredibly large courses that we have. This means that from a staff perspective, it's very difficult to provide the level of detail that the students need to provide it in that kind of timely fashion. Very challenging. Staff are getting repeatedly asked the same questions, so you feel like you're repeating yourself a lot. And a lot of the support that we are offering is kind of diagnosing the same recurring errors. So the students are encountering the same things. We end up having repeated conversations with people. The other issue that we have is that we know that once the students get kind of comfortable with working with actual data sets, what we want to be able to ensure that they are doing is not just analyzing the data and working through the processes. We want them to really be able to translate what their statistical outcomes actually mean in terms of biological interpretations. So by training them and giving them the good foundations that they need to be able to understand how to analyze the data, we can then have more detailed conversations with our students about what that data actually means in a biological context. And we know that this is not just specific for Glasgow, and that there are many other institutions that have similar kind of issues around the same kind of things. So with this in mind, this is when we teamed up with LearnSci and we started working with them using their Smart Worksheets. So this was a few years ago when we started doing this, and at the time LearnSci didn't have an extensive number of custom built or a library of pre-made smart worksheets. So they've really expanded on this recently, and we're absolutely delighted to be able to embed these more frequently into a variety of our courses. We find that they are incredibly useful and that the students really value the input that we have from these worksheets for a variety of different reasons. So just to explain, if you don't know what the smart worksheets actually are, so these are an interactive learning resource that we have embedded into Moodle, which is our virtual learning environment. And you can use them as either summative or formative. So I'll talk about that a little bit in the study that we did, how we've used these. So they're really useful for getting the students to work through the processes of going from having a raw data set to being able to analyze it appropriately and generate appropriate plots, and then thinking beyond that, thinking about what that data actually means, rather than just understanding the processes that they've gone through in order to be able to produce the plots that they've produced. So we found that they're really excellent for building student confidence. So what you can see here is that as a student works through the smart worksheet, they're presented with a series of different questions, and each of these questions can have different marks associated with this. So if this is a 1 mark question, the student answers it and gets it wrong, then they will get no marks awarded for this, but they can still get immediate feedback on where they've gone wrong, so they can immediately go away and find out more information to help fill that knowledge gap in real time as they're working through their smart worksheet. If it's a multi-mark question, then the student gets it wrong the first time around, they can have another go, having been signposted to more information to help them understand where they've gone wrong, and so they can still get marks associated with that question. And so it's really building that confidence in understanding where they've gone wrong and how to make sure that doesn't happen again. So this is hugely helpful for us because we're already giving the students what we understand to be the basics to help them really support their knowledge, to make sure that they're not encountering that issue again. And I'm sure anybody that teaches on any courses will know that the students always want more. They want more questions, they want more opportunity to practice, more examples. And so being able to have these smart worksheets that are automatically marked, this is hugely time saving in terms of staff time, because you're giving your students consistent, instant feedback that they can then use immediately, rather than having to wait to get feedback several weeks down the line and the students are already thinking about other things. They've forgotten the whole point of the assessment. They're getting all that information at the time when they're actually doing it. The other thing that's really useful from a staff perspective is that these smart worksheets come with a breakdown of our different analytics. So as a member of staff, what you can see is you can see what students are engaging with in terms of which worksheets they're accessing, how long they're taking to do it, which students are accessing it, where they're struggling. So how many people are getting the questions right versus how many students are getting it wrong. So the students are working through all this independently, but we can really get a good overview of who's doing what, and if we need to provide more support in a particular area that the students are not necessarily doing particularly well on. So there are a huge number of different LearnSci smart worksheets that are available, and as I've said, they've kind of expanded their library quite significantly, so that there are a lot more kind of pre-made smart worksheets that you can now use. However, we used a custom-built smart worksheet. So at the University of Glasgow, we have our subscription to LearnSci, and so we have access to all the library of different resources that we have. So this is not just something that we use within the life sciences, we do use them across the university, so in chemistry and things as well. And so we use over 170 of the LearnSci resources, and we know that we have over 4,000 students that engage with these different learning tools. So this is an incredibly useful resource that has really wide reach. So for this specific project, Laura and myself are just 2 members of a larger team that we're working with LearnSci to use smart worksheets that were custom built to help us specifically work with our students to help build their confidence in using R and working with large amounts of data. So we found this incredibly useful because this gave us the opportunity to be able to embed authentic data that really sat well within the particular courses that we were working with. And so we could really help support our students, not just understanding the kind of basics that are required for using R and working with statistics, but also allowing us to have those kind kind of higher order learning conversations with the students so that they knew not just the processes to produce their plots, but also to think about what that meant from a kind of biological perspective. So this was a team of staff that worked across several different level 2 courses. And so they're listed here. So this top one here, this Fundamental Topics in Biology 2X, this is a compulsory course that all of our life sciences level 2 students have to take. So it's an incredibly large course, and then all of our students have to take it. These other 2 courses that are listed are compulsory for specific degrees, but can also be taken as optional courses. So the Animal Biology, Evolution and Ecology 2A, that's a compulsory course for anybody that wants to do zoology or marine biology. And Microbiology and Immunology is another second semester course, which is compulsory if you want to do microbiology or immunology, but can be optional for our students. So any students that were participating in our study could have taken all 3 of these courses, or they may just have taken the fundamental topics in biology ones. So there's a huge number of, a spread of different students here. We have a large number of different backgrounds, a huge number of different understandings of the importance of using R, and what kind of data analysis they feel like they will be doing when they go on and do their degree. So it's really important that we embed these kind of tools at this stage within the students' degrees so that they can really progress through the years having those really good foundations that allow them to then go on and understand how they're going to use this going forward. Oh, not too far. Okay, so this is a bit more of an overview of our study. So as I said, we're working specifically with these custom smart worksheets, and across the 3 level 2 life sciences courses, we're looking at building the students' confidence, their understanding of working with large data sets, and using RStudio specifically to be able to do this. So if we look at the kind of breakdown of how these courses look, as I said, the Fundamental Topics in Biology is our first semester course. So with the other 2 courses that come in second semester, we were a bit more organized, and we were able to gather data from across 2 academic sessions for these 2 courses. However, with Fundamental Topics, because it was a first semester course, we weren't quite as organized, so we only managed to get 1 cohort in our study for this. Now, because this is our compulsory option for all of our life sciences students, you can see that it's a large course. We're talking about 650 students here. So this gives us access to a lot of students to be able to kind of support them through working with data. And for a lot of them, this would have been the first time that they would have encountered a smart worksheet. So giving them the experience of actually working with the teaching resource itself. So within Fundamental Topics in Biology, we use this as a formative assessment, and the smart worksheet was done during a class session. So the students gathered data during a lab class. They were then given the smart worksheet on a computer lab, and that helped them to work through and analyze the data that they had gathered themselves within their lab class. In the second semester, when we have our animal biology, evolution and ecology, and our microbiology and immunology courses, these were much smaller. So we're looking at a class size of between 250, 300 students for each of these. So for the animal biology, again, this was introduced as a formative assessment. So students were gathering their own data and then working independently at home to analyze this data that they had collected as part of a lab session. However, for microbiology and immunology, this was a summative assessment. So both Laura and myself are the course coordinators of this course, and we introduced the smart worksheets as part of their summative assessment. So there is a grade associated with the work that they did with the summative smart worksheet. So they had access to other smart worksheets that were formative. So if they hadn't had access to a smart worksheet before, they were able to get used to how it worked before they used it as a summative assessment, but the custom one was embedded as a summative assessment. So what was excellent about this from a staff perspective was that we were able to work with LearnSci to give them a very large data set that was associated with the data that the students would be getting themselves within the lab. So by giving LearnSci this very large data set, when the students accessed the smart worksheet, they downloaded a subsection of this very large data set. So we knew the data was accurate. We knew there was no major outliers because it was something that we had provided. However, what it meant was that we were not getting 300 versions of the same graph, which we then had to mark. So the students were told that they were given their own unique data set, and the Smart Worksheet would know if they used their friend's data. So rather than just copying someone else who was more comfortable and confident using R to be able to analyze their data, the students were given a unique data set, and they would be marked down if they provided somebody else's results as they worked through the Smart Worksheets. This was then auto-marked, and so a percentage of the student's final grade was taken out of staff hands. It was already marked, and what we were able to do was have the students prepare a lab report assessment, and we could look at how they had biologically interpreted the outcomes that they had from working with the Smart Worksheets. So this reduced massively the amount of staff time that staff had to spend marking these 300 lab reports, because we knew the graphs were already correct. So as part of our study, what we did was we invited the participants to take part in completing a survey. So this was a survey that covered all of the 3 courses. So as we mentioned, some students might have participated in just the fundamental topics course, but they might have also taken the other 2 as optional courses as well. So they might be reporting their feelings for the Smart Worksheets in all of those different scenarios. The survey was mixed method, so we used a range of different questions, so Likert score questions, and then qualitative data as well. And then at the end, we invited the students to come along to a focus group so they could expand on the data that they had given us within the survey. So I'm now going to hand over to Laura, who's going to talk through the findings that we had from our study.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks for a lovely introduction to the project. So I'm going to cover our findings, and I'm going to start with the quantitative data analysis that we did. So I know this graph's pretty tiny, but the graph at the top, so the 2 bars at the top, we asked students their confidence in both data analysis, which is the very top, and then the one underneath is their confidence with using R before they had used the Smart Worksheets. So dark green is not confident at all, and pink is very confident. So you can see we had quite a lot of students before they used our Smart Worksheets were not confident at all with data analysis or with using R. No surprises, the graph below is going to be after they used the Smart Worksheets, and you can see that the confidence in both the data analysis and also their confidence in using R has grown a lot. There is barely any of the dark green which is not confident at all left, and there is a much bigger proportion of the pink bars which are very confident. So that was really nice to see. And if you look at it in terms of averages, the average score that they rated themselves in data analysis before using the Smart Worksheets was 2.61, and that went up to 3.15 after using the Smart Worksheets. And again, when we're talking about using R specifically, before using the Smart Worksheets, the average was 2.55, and that went up to an average of 3.2. So that was really nice to see that the Smart Worksheets are helping both with their statistical analysis and the actual using of R. And we had about 200, just over 200 survey respondents for this, which for our student cohorts is a lot. So that was nice to see as well. Next slide, Claire. We also asked a couple of sort of generic questions. So the blue and dark blue are agree and strongly agree. So you can see across these 4 questions that I'm going to mention, it was positive responses. So the first one was our Smart Worksheets straightforward to use and to interact with, and you can see overwhelmingly the students agree with that, which is nice to see. I think the dark red, which are strongly disagree, might be the students who were really annoyed by the number of significant figures that they had to put things to, which was quite a lot of comments. I don't know if there's been any changes in that over the iterations of the Smart Worksheets since we developed ours, but the students didn't like having to put a specific number of significant figures or decimal places. The next one was, how much do you agree that the Smart Worksheets helped you quickly correct mistakes and misunderstandings with the rapid feedback? And again, you can see an overwhelmingly positive response. And I'll go through the qualitative data analysis in a minute, and that instant feedback comes up a lot. How much do you agree that Smart Worksheets supported your understanding and learning of R? And that agrees with the data I showed in the previous slide, where again, overwhelmingly positive response to this. The students do feel like these Smart Worksheets are supporting them in that. And then, did it help them understand the value of using R over other programs? Then you can see again, mostly positive response, but not as strongly as the others. So I think they understand the use of R, but maybe we could do a bit more in explaining why we've chosen R as a program, which the reason behind our choice for it is that it's an open access resource, so students can continue to use it after they leave university. They will always have access to it. We asked the students about the level of difficulty in the Smart Worksheets, and they said that we got that about right. And then, would you recommend the Smart Worksheet to your friends? Out of 10, the average was 8.58, so a really high score for that. So the students do really appreciate these Smart Worksheets. Next slide, Claire. So the qualitative analysis I'm currently working through because we are writing this up as a paper. So we're doing a reflexive thematic analysis, the Brown and Clark method, and I am not quite finished it yet. So I haven't quite finalized the themes. So what I'm going to cover here is more sort of threads that I've pulled out. I'm not going to call them themes because I'm not quite nailed down my themes yet, but these are the sort of threads that are coming through as I've been going through the data. So we specifically asked about confidence in learning. What was nice is we see from the quantitative data that the students do feel like the Smart Worksheet is helping from that. But there was actually a lot of open-ended text comments, again, which was surprising because we don't normally get the best survey responses in our institute from our students. And that learning and confidence really, the reason behind it came out in the open-ended text comments. So what the students really valued was that knowing they were correct and that they were doing it right. That was the overwhelming response from the students. And they felt like that was supported by that real-time immediate feedback and also the step-by-step approach that the Smart Worksheets take them through. So that made it easier and less overwhelming, but really helped build that confidence that they were doing it step by step, they were getting that feedback and they could understand as they went through it. Another sort of thread that came out quite strongly was this independent or self-directed learning. So the students commented a lot about being able to work things out for themselves, that it didn't give the answer straight away, but it sort of guided them to rethink things. The prompts that we'd built in if they got it wrong, or the prompts before they put their answer in, really helped to guide them to think things through before jumping in with the answer. And what was really nice to see was that there was a positive framing from the students' language around getting it wrong and then trying again. And I was really pleased to see this because our students are terrified of failure and we don't build in enough space in our curriculum, just with time pressures, to allow the students to fail and try and fail again. And this was also in the students who used the summative worksheet. So it wasn't just linked to the formative ones. So even though one of the worksheets was summative, they still had this positive framing around it. So I really liked seeing that in the comments. What they found useful was having the physical images of what the graphs should look like to compare with what they had on their screen on R. It helped them see what you find as students, they get the gist of it right, but their axes are wrong or their labels are wrong, and they've got the main points, but it's not quite perfect. Whereas with the Smart Worksheets, and they can see what their graph should look like, that allows them then to go in and tweak and tinker and make sure that they're actually getting it completely right. And then the students really liked that the mistakes were not carried through to the lab report. This was mostly from the students that were using the summative Smart Worksheet. And while I agree with them that most of the students didn't carry errors through to the lab report, I can't say that that was strictly true for all of them. But what was nice, when having marked this lab report previously, when it was just the full lab report versus marking it when it is now in combination with the Smart Worksheet, is that the marking rubric now is focused very much on how the students present that data, how they understand it, how they interpret it, how they pull out the limitations of it, rather than the actual data analysis part, because that is worth 30% and that is graded elsewhere. What it did make me realize is that our students really need to focus more on that understanding and interpreting the data part. When you dissociate the actual doing the data analysis, which usually takes up quite a lot of the marking time in a lab report and quite a lot of focus, you then actually see, okay, they're not quite getting this concept. So that then helps us adapt how things are delivered in labs the following year, etc. And it also helps you then tailor that feedback specifically to the data analysis presentation side of things, which will have a lot more value to the students in the following years. You're not spending all that time giving feedback on, oh, you did this test slightly wrong or whatever, which would normally eat up most of your feedback comments. So it gave us a lot more space to focus on the other aspects of the lab report, which was nice. What was interesting is the students from their comments felt like the Smart Worksheets really helped them with the understanding the why behind the analysis and what the data actually means, rather than the actual using R. Rather than them helping them learn the coding for R, etc. It helped them really understand what they were doing and why they were doing it, and then how that all comes together and what it is you actually want to achieve with that experiment or with that data. And that is nice to see, because especially with AI, which is so good at writing code now, the focus should be on the students really understanding what they're doing and why they're doing it, rather than how to write a code in R. So that was really nice to see that the students feel that themselves, that it's helping them understand the why rather than the R code. Although it is helping them understand the R code, it's the why that they really focused on in this qualitative analysis. Next slide, Claire. The Smart Worksheets, the students found really useful, but they liked them as a range of approaches. So what we have for our students is labs with GTAs, graduate teaching assistants, who, alongside the staff that are in the lab, wander around, give feedback, answer questions, etc. We also have our drop-in sessions where a staff member and GTAs are in a room, and anyone that needs that additional support can turn up to these drop-in sessions and get that extra support that they need. So the students really liked having the Smart Worksheets in combination with that. So they liked that the Smart Worksheets were quicker and easier than using a lab manual, because our lab manuals have quite a lot of stuff in them. They're very comprehensive lab manuals, so they found the Smart Worksheets a lot less overwhelming. And they also liked that digital aspect. They thought it was easier to spot errors and easier to follow on a laptop than trying to follow code that's in their printed lab manuals. But what came across is that they really liked the combination of Smart Worksheets with GTAs and with the drop-in sessions. So the Smart Worksheets were complementary. And the reason it looks from the qualitative analysis is that although there is explanations in the Smart Worksheet for when bits go wrong, some students need more of an explanation. And that's where the GTAs come in, because they can talk the students really in detail through what's going on. So I think it is good having a combination, because in a class of 650, you have a very wide range of experience. You've got students who have never used R before this course, or you've got students that have used it a lot and if they took a specific course in year one. So having that additional support is really useful. And then what was nice to see, and I wouldn't have thought about it when we were designing this project, and it wouldn't have come out if we had only done quantitative analysis, was the social anxiety aspect. So quite a few students mentioned that they suffer from social anxiety and they really struggle to ask GTAs for help when they're in the lab. Now, our lab groups are large, there are 100 students usually. So what the students wrote was that by having the Smart Worksheet give them that immediate feedback during the lab, they didn't have to speak to the GTAs. And that made them feel a lot more comfortable and at ease, which is something that I hadn't really thought about before. And it was nice to see that this is helping that specific cohort of students. There was also students, and they didn't mention that they have social anxiety, but they did mention anxiety over waiting to ask questions. So we have limited number of GTAs for the 100 students in the room, and they can feel quite stressed if they are trying to ask a question, but they know there's a big queue of people wanting to ask questions, and so that might put them off asking questions. So although they don't have social anxiety as such, they still prefer the Smart Worksheet being able to give them that instant feedback and answers, which is a very big benefit when you have these really large classes. Next slide, please, Claire. So yeah, just in conclusion, our Smart Worksheets have been a real benefit to both students and staff. It's allowed us to focus on different aspects of assessments, for for example, and to help support that really wide range of students that we get in and the different experience levels that they have. And I'd just like to say a big thank you to Aidan Barker, who I know is on the call, because he really went above and beyond with the R aspect to make sure that these smart worksheets do what they need to do, because myself and Claire couldn't guide him in the R aspect because we are not R experts either. So just a massive thank you to Aidan for that. That is all from us. If anyone has any questions, we'd love to hear them.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. That was, there's so many moving parts in this project, and there's so much to unpick that I'm really looking forward to your paper for when you come out with that, because there's so many things that I could talk to you about now with regards to the way that this project helps with decoupling one of the most complex areas around science, which is the data analysis. It decouples that from the lab report, but and then allows them to circle back to it and actually then focus on, like I said, the what, the how, and the why, and more of the more intellectual discussions you can then have about why you've done that practical in the first place. So that's fantastic. And also then you're tapping into that effective learning domain by providing students with that little tutor on their shoulder, because they've got that instant feedback. And when I run labs with 100 students in them, I can see there are some students that are feeling quite lost because they got their hand up, I can't get there quick enough, and they're probably feeling a little bit isolated and a little bit lost, and that's something that we don't want. We want students to have that sense of belonging, don't we, and to feel they're actually being supported. And so it's really lovely that you've combined all of those things: cognitive learning domains, effective learning domains, data analysis, support, students not having to rely on, other people asking questions, and so on. So incredible project, really, really incredible. And so thank you so much for that really fantastic presentation. And I've got loads of questions, but I'm sure there's quite a few others to have as well. So Aidan has his hand up first. So Aidan, over to you.
Yeah, no, the really interesting presentation. It was really fun working on this project as well with you guys. So I did have a question about sort of the relationships between the students and the GTAs, like before and after introducing the Smart Worksheets. So one of the sort of challenges that you highlighted was, their sort of big cues to talk to the GTAs. Were there any changes that you noted between introducing it, that the types of questions that they were asking, or that the students were asking of the GTAs, or if there were any sort of like changes in the volume of the amount of questions that were being asked? I was just wondering how it might affect those sorts of classroom dynamics a little bit more.
So for the 2X course, I don't actually run the labs, but I'm the course coordinator for that course. And yes, the number of questions has gone down. And then also the R drop-in sessions that we run for both 2X and 2D. Claire, you ran the 2D ones. Was there one student turned up this year? And we think it's because they're getting that support from the Smart Worksheet that they actually don't need the support from the drop-in sessions anymore.
Yeah, the difference in the number of students coming to these optional sessions has dropped off a cliff. And what is really nice for going forward, and Aidan, you will know this, is that we're now going to start introducing these Smart Worksheets into level 1. So already when they are first thinking about data handling at a very basic kind of first year level, they will already start to get access to these Smart Worksheets to support them. So yeah, the difference in the number of questions and the quality of the questions and what the students need to answer has changed dramatically because of these Smart Worksheets helping them through the basics that, the repetitive stuff that we felt that you were saying on repeat all the time now it's not a thing anymore.
Thank you.
Question. Anybody else? So Emily?
Yes, hi. I thought that was fantastic. I enjoyed every part of that. Yeah, I think it's so great to see Smart Worksheets being used to focus on the why, not the how. I think that's really powerful and what we've always kind of hoped Smart Worksheets could be, and we know they can be. So really great to see that in practice. I was going to ask what the process of converting it from what you had previously to the Smart Worksheet was like, and were there any extra considerations about different learning contexts, for example, if students are coming from different biological backgrounds, like experiences, whether they're interested in zoology or microbiology. Yeah, how did you sort of make that all work?
Well, I guess Aidan made it work. We took our lab and our lab report as it was, and we pretty much just adapted that to a smart worksheet, because we're really time poor, and that was the quickest and easiest way to do this, and we were working to a tight deadline to try and get this implemented on time. But actually, although for 2D, certainly for the one that's the summative one, although we do have students from lots of different degrees, we really focus on the microbiology and immunology side of it because it's the prerequisite for the 2 degrees. So that one was kept as is. With the fundamental topics, again, I didn't design that smart worksheet because I don't have the R background, but maybe Aidan can help discuss. I'm pretty sure for 2X, we just took the lab as is again and adapted it to the smart worksheet formula.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while now, so I'm not 100% confident exactly what the approach was, but basically we just, worked together with Claire and Laura and Denise and whomever was, really teaching the modules to try and identify how we would do the data randomization and those sorts of things. But also, I think, just asking kind of the questions around like, what are the key things that students tend to get tripped up on, and making sure that those are integrated into the feedback. We know that like you as teaching academics, you guys know what the most common questions are. So I think just having a focus on where can we provide the most support within that feedback for those most common mistakes was like really key to the approach.
I also wanted to say I love reflexive thematic analysis, big fan. I'm sure a lot of people in the company know that I was like, yes, Braun and Clark for the win. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of that, definitely.
We will write it up eventually, promise.
That's great, thank you. I've got a couple of other questions, and so I'll hopefully wait. I mean, I'll ask my questions, and others can think about what theirs will be as well whilst I ask mine. One of the things I'm really passionate about in terms of the way I teach is to try and present a positive framework, like you said, around getting it wrong to get it right. And it's one of the things I've been really keen to support in LearnSci as well, in terms of developing smart worksheets, and that's to provide that formative approach where students can try the wrong answers, find out why they're the wrong answers, because understanding why something is incorrect is actually more valuable than just getting it right. Sometimes it's just, I just got it right, I'm not quite sure how, but understanding why is behind that is really important. Have you noticed any change in students' attitudes around, sticking their hand up and having a go at answering a question, or any confidence around that after these experiences that you've had with the students in this particular smart worksheet, and following on from those comments that you've got? Just wondering if there's a way that you're thinking about maybe how you can explore that a little bit more.
So for 2D, again, come back to this because it's the one me and Claire run. They use the smart worksheet after the lab sessions. So our lab sessions are sort of wrapping up as they're starting to work on that that smart worksheet. So I wouldn't say I've seen an increase in questions in the lab sessions as such, but it's hard because the students are so terrified of failure, and they're so bad at trying it that I think even if the smart worksheet is making the difference that they are saying here, I don't think that's going to be visible to us, because I think it's such a big issue now that it's going to take more than a couple of smart worksheets, which are great, to make a real big difference to this, what is a massive problem currently.
I'm curious about how that will have an impact, whether you're bringing this into the first year, and whether that'll start to help students feel a bit more confident about having a go, and so on and so forth. And so that could be interesting. So we have another question. So Camilla, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. That was a really interesting talk. I was just wondering how you managed to get such a high response rate from the students to the service, because that can be really difficult. And the same with the focus group. How did you attract the students to come along to those?
So we don't normally get response rates this high at in our department. Just caveat that my other surveys that I've been doing for other projects, you're lucky if you can get about 15 students to reply. So what one of the lab leads did was put up the survey at the end of the lab that they used the smart worksheet in. So at the very end of the session, he had the QR code up and said, we'd really like if you could fill in this survey, which we do for other projects and they don't do it. So I think he's just really persuasive, or very, like, the students just really appreciated the Smart Worksheets during that session and thought, you know what, I am going to go and fill it out. So I think the timing of when that, we also sent it out on Moodle at further points in the year, but certainly most responses came after, like, directly after the lab sessions ran. But I like to think it's because they actually really liked the Smart Worksheets and wanted to tell us that, because you usually find students will tell you things if they're really happy or really angry. So I'd like to think they were really happy at the end of the labs and wanted to share that.
I think
That makes sense.
Another thing that was quite useful was that, you know, all the members of staff that were kind of working on this project all kind of help with the other courses as well in some ways. Not everybody, but, you know, most people teach on at least 2 of those courses, so you know the students. So especially, you know, helping out, like with Laura and I doing a bit, like Laura course coordinates for the fundamental topics, and then both of us deliver labs on that course, and then we see the students again in 2D. Having built more of a relationship with the students is quite useful. But yeah, again, other projects, you don't get the same level of buy-in. So hopefully it is because the students really like the Smart Worksheets and they wanted to tell us.
Brilliant. Thank you. There's always a really nice correlation with when they feel happy about something, they want to tell us. But like you've said, there's always, if they're really unhappy about us, something they always really want to tell us. So yeah, you get this sort of bimodal approach to these things, don't you? But yes, fabulous response rate. And it's definitely something across the sector that I know that, you know, we really struggle to get students to respond, like at Warwick, for things, even just module feedback. So it's great that you've given them something to feel passionate about to respond with. That's great. There is a comment in the chat. Unfortunately, I don't know who it is, so I can't say who has written this because it hasn't got an ID on it. But it says, apologies, I'm unable to come on the camera or use the microphone. Many thanks for very informative presentation. I'm very interested. Sophia. Thank you, Dawn. Sophia. Thank you, Sophia. Many thanks for the very informative presentation. I'm very interested in the slightly less positive responses to the questions about the necessity and utility of using R that you showed. And then in brackets, probably because we don't use R, and I'm wondering if we're headed for extinction. What did the students' comments read the choice of having to use? So what did the students comment on regarding the choice of having to use R? Was there any comments around that?
So there wasn't really anything that came out of the qualitative analysis around using R. So the cohort that answered this survey were taught Excel in first year and then moved into using R in second year. The cohort that are coming into our second year this year will have had R in first year. And it was just to do with the timings of rolling things out and changing the curriculum. So there weren't any actual comments in the survey responses about using R specifically. And I think it's because we don't give them a choice. They're told when they come into second year, you have to use R. And actually for the lab reports, it has to be an R output that's the graphs. They're not allowed to use Excel for it. And that's because I think if you gave them the choice, they might take the easy route and not learn R. But they didn't seem to have any issues. It's not as positive a response, you're right, as the other ones. But I think they might just not have understood it. I'm not sure that we actually tell them why we make them use R, which maybe they have now included in the first year when they've introduced it. But if not, I will put it in my intro lecture. It's a good point for 2X this year. You use R because it's a free software and you can use it when you finish your degree.
Yeah, so I was going to ask a question that Chris has also popped it in the chat, which is, what are the other, alternatives? Is Python, I guess, and would hit the limit of Excel pretty quickly. So at Warwick we use Excel for everything pretty much. We don't quite force students into using anything at the moment, but we are starting to introduce these in different in different lectures and different modules more specifically, and it tends to come down into preference, academic preference. So is there a discussion around which one you would lean towards when it came to deciding to use R, or was it pretty much a sort of done deal really, and how you decided where you were going to focus your attention?
From my understanding, it was the free access to it. So I know that you have to pay for Python, you have to pay for Excel, and we wanted to have something that the students can use when they leave university and lose access to or Microsoft accounts, etc.
Yeah.
And also, I think coding can be quite daunting for a lot of students. So if you give them the option of learning it or not, a lot of the students will choose not. But actually, we're moving into a graduate market where coding, big data analysis skills are becoming more and more important. They are the skills of the future. So it's trying to make sure that students are engaging with that.
Yeah.
And although there's RStudio, which isn't as codey as just R, it is still hopefully getting them to the stage where they know that they could do it, even if they're not an expert in it. So it's trying to get over that initial fear.
Yeah, and ironically, when I talk to students about learning some of these, they also, again, they're quite anxious about it, and they'll say, oh, they just stick with using Excel, but they don't really know how to use Excel either, and SPSS, and they don't understand. What they don't understand is the outputs and what they mean. So I love the journey that your students have gone through, where they're now fully understanding the why they're doing something. I think that's really, really valuable. So yeah, it's really interesting. There's a comment from Tom talking about possible alternatives are that R seems to specialize in statistics, and the ecosystem has evolved to develop libraries to support that domain. So
yes, there are a lot of packages that can be used in R. ggplot, for instance, and things like that. But we do teach the students how to use the packages as well as they move up through 3rd and 4th year, so that they can produce these nice plots for their reports.
Another comment. Lots of comments on this webinar. We have lots of comments, which is great. Lots of interaction with people, which we don't always get. R certainly has an easier learning curve. Python has a lot of dependencies that are more challenging for a novice to install. RStudio has a great interface for easy package installation. So yeah, lots of support, I guess, for what you're saying, and that students can then also continue to use that. Jason, you have your hand up.
Hi guys, thanks. That was great. Yeah, a couple of questions really. The comment about feedback piqued my interest, and I was wondering if you could maybe expand on that a bit. Whether maybe it was like the way that it was done, or it lacked detail, or something that the GTAs found they were typically doing that we weren't.
Yeah, so the comments about more feedback needed when it's wrong. I think it's that with R, there's a lot of places the students can go wrong with it. So what we did is build in prompts that had the most common errors that students would have made. And this came from, we have an excellent team member, Donald Reed, who is our R expert. And he pulled out all the common mistakes he would see in the lab reports over the years, or just from working and running the labs. Like, this is where the students have normally gone wrong if this happens. But obviously, the Smart Worksheet can't cover all eventualities. Students will be doing stuff in the coding that you wouldn't expect them to do. They always throw you a curveball. So I think that's where the GTAs then had the real value. If it was something that we couldn't predict or that was a bit more unusual, the Smart Worksheet wasn't able to guide them in how to correct that. So the GTAs can then step in, look at the code and go, oh no, you've gone completely off piste here. So I think that's where the value of the GTAs come in. It's when the students are just really not getting it and really struggling, and it's beyond the Smart Worksheet's limits of help.
Right. Another question. Jason, did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
Okay, brilliant. We got one more couple of comments. So Sophia has also commented again. So how hard was it for staff to get sufficiently confident with R to be able to teach? Or did all of your staff become, were they quite fully proficient before? And you've just mentioned that you did have someone who was was leading that charge really. And she says, I know I was recently unsuccessful in a job application because I confessed to not have a clue about RStudio, lol. I would be with you there, Sophia, absolutely. On many of these things. So how do you get staff to feel a bit more confident in these things? Or did they work through the sheets as well and go through Smart Worksheets? Was there anyone, and demonstrators too?
Yeah, so I am completely and utterly useless at R, even though I shared the office with Donald, who's our R expert, for many years. I'm still utterly useless at R, and it's because we only ever use it once a year to run specific labs, and I think if you're not doing it repeatedly, it's hard to get it to stick. So I don't run the R labs. We get staff who are confident to run the labs. So Donald runs most of the R labs that the Smart Worksheet runs in, but we also have several other members of staff that step in to help him with that. but they are not anywhere near as expert as Donald is. I think as long as you have a basic understanding of the R coding, because it's specific things at second year, it's still very prescriptive what we're getting them to do. That even a basic level of R is enough to run the labs. And what I did like is now that all of the smart worksheet in 2D marks all of that RStudio stuff, then I really don't have to know the RStudio because I focus on the interpretation and understanding part. So I love the smart worksheet for that reason. So Donald does also for staff every summer run our training sessions, so staff can go along to that every year if they wish, or they can drop in at any point. He also has a R page, middle page set up that you can work through as staff and or students to help you get more proficient in R. And I did sit on an interview panel a few months ago where we did put RStudio as a desirable on the job application, and they admitted to not having any RStudio knowledge. So all we asked in that interview was that they would commit to learning it. So yes.
Oh, we'll go for those jobs. Yeah, we'll apply for those jobs next to Sophia, I think. We've got another question from Jason.
Oh yeah. Can you talk about the usage stats that you threw up in one of the early slides? Because I think I saw something like 50,000 attempts or something on these things. Is that skewed? Is there like a couple of resources that are incredibly high or something?
Yeah, so those analytics are for across the university. So we don't just have the smart worksheets, we've also got the animations and all these kind of things that are also embedded, and it's across biology, life sciences and chemistry as well. So that's not specific to the smart worksheets. However, they are embedded in them. So things like, within 2D, we have several of the different kind of animations that the students can use if they want to. So that would be recorded. But things like the smart worksheet that they have to do for their lab report is obviously going to skew that, because if they don't complete the smart worksheet, then they can't get the assessment grade for that assessment. So we have lots of LearnSci resources that the students can dip in and out of that are there if they want to, and they are embedded from first year. I know that there's some that go into third year as well. So we have lots of students that have that access to various different things that contribute to those numbers.
Okay, so a lot of optional stuff that they're not actually taking up by the looks of it. Is that fair?
Yeah, they can do. So for chemistry, I can't comment, but I know that they are very heavy users. I think, Aidan, you had kind of commented on this before, that chemistry and have got a lot of resources as well, but I'm not sure exactly what the usage looks like for them.
I think for chemistry, they have them as summative and they are completed at the end of every lab, so weekly for their students. So they will have quite a lot of usage stats.
Okay, so I'm mindful of time here. This has been a very active discussion, which is fantastic. I have one last question then to Aidan, and then I've got a couple more comments, and then I'll draw this to a close.
Yeah, so I was wondering about like the sort of stickiness of the confidence in students using R. So if they, I don't know exactly what the setup is, but when students like go on to additional modules or into their third year, maybe they're doing like independent projects or something, do you find that students are choosing to use R now more for those types of things? Are there any more opportunities where they're like kind of actively applying those skills, even if maybe it's not required?
Claire will be able to answer that soon, because Claire's taking on the third year micro course this coming semester. We don't really give them a choice. They have to use R. If it's a summative assessment, they have to use R for it in their third and fourth year. We are very strict on that. And then we do build on their R knowledge. So we start using the more advanced statistical packages and things like that as they go through. But it would be a nice follow-up study to do to see if that confidence does carry through.
Brilliant. The next
I
project.
think in their honours projects as well, some students maybe choose to use R where it's not a prescriptive thing, because by the time they've got to their final year, they know it and they're more confident with using it. So if they've got data that they have to analyse in their honours project, they will choose to use R, even if they're not told that they have to.
That would be a nice follow-on. I think that's where I'd focus, with students being more autonomous in their data analysis. That'd be amazing. Thank you. So one last comment. So 2 comments. So from Ruben, oh, that's just gone. Jamovi is also a great GUI for R. If anyone hasn't seen it before, it's a bit more accessible than RStudio. And then one from Kirsty, which I think is fantastic, which is one point I will make with teaching R is that it's great to show even when we make mistakes and how we handle and showcase that vulnerability. So students feel comfortable making mistakes as well. 100% agree with that. And I think that's the last comment I'm going to end on this because it's a really lovely, positive comment. So I just want everyone to say thank you to Laura and Claire for a fantastic webinar. Thank you for presenting for our last webinar. It's certainly been one of the most active discussions that we've had. So really, really grateful for that. Thank you so much. And for those of you that do not belong to LearnSci, you would be welcome to leave the call. We're now just going to have a quick conversation with Claire and Laura with the company staff. And so thank you so much for attending. And if you want to catch up on the webinars, please do so. All our information will be on our website to catch up with the webinars if you've missed any. So thank you very much.